The Fed15 podcast is presented by Serving Those Who Serve, a financial planning practice serving federal government employees and retirees all over the country. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be taken as financial advice. All listeners should consult their personal advisors before taking any action. The opinions expressed by our hosts are their own and do not reflect the views, policies, or position of either Raymond James or Serving Those Who Serve. Securities are offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc. Serving Those Who Serve is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services, Inc.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Fed15, presented by Serving Those Who Serve. Each week, we discuss the latest news and info that Feds need to know in 15 minutes-ish or less. Sometimes we get a little long-winded. So whether you are a seasoned federal employee or just getting started in your career, we've got you covered. So grab your coffee, your energy drink, your green juice, whatever it is that gets you rolling, keeps you rolling, and we will tell you what you know might have missed. We are your host. I'm Dan Sipe, and I am joined by the incomparable Katelyn.
Hello, Dan, and welcome back from your
Thank you.
Long sojourn away.
It was one of the longer stretches that I've taken. It was a full 10 days, one for each finger, and first time in the great state of Montana. And, it was just wonderful, amazing scenery, amazing people. Shout out to my guy, Dusty, who, this could only happen to me, has some federal crossover experience. So we had some interesting conversations about that, as you might guess. So thank you, Dusty, for taking me places and bringing me back alive.
Awesome. Well, it gets no less exciting here on the Fed15 than it does in Montana, because we have a very interesting episode today covering some really interesting topics that are often of interest for the federal employees and retirees with whom we speak on the daily, day in, day out. Dan is going to talk to us a little bit about working in retirement. And when I say that, you might be thinking, Katelyn, I'm allergic to even the concept of that, right? But what we mean is many feds successfully transition to a consulting career, to owning their own business and those sorts of things. And we have to be mindful as a federal retiree with kind of how that is managed. One thing that we've learned working with federal government employees and retirees is that you guys are pretty hardworking and very creative folk. Typically, you're not just one career as maybe the general populace might think, right? So Dan's going to talk with us about how we can manage that. And then I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topics of all time. I love talking about it. I hope you love hearing about it. Roth conversions. We're going to talk about Roth conversions and kind of the continued case for those here in this new tax era that we are in. But before we get into Roth conversions, I can get carried away easily. Dan, talk to us about why retirement might not necessarily mean the end of work.
Sure. Okay. So remember, folks, I've been doing this close to 40 years now, to the point where people are saying, how much longer are you going to keep doing this? It's going to be a while. So let's disabuse anybody of those notions. And there's a phrase that I've been saying so long that my kids can finish it. And that is that federal service is, and they immediately chime in with, back end loaded. And I've maintained that throughout my career. I discovered it with my father-in-law and sort of built it into my planning and advisory work. So what does that mean? Well, you build up some pretty great benefits, not the least of which is a pension, which most of the population doesn't have. But also, you invest in your mental capital throughout your career. You acquire skills, knowledge, expertise, and relationships that you can leverage for higher and higher income, but also that is valuable to you after you stop working, because we're located in the DC area. And the other phrase that people can practically finish for me is when I say the DC area does not tend to allow its federal employees to retire to a hammock. One of my most celebrated examples that I can recall is a gentleman who did not feel that he was in a high-profile agency. It was National Forest Service. And when I mentioned to him, this town has a tendency not to let its executive talent retire, he goes, well, that won't be me, Dan. I'm in this 1 week. 1 week. And he was working again. So you may choose to do that. And Katelyn's right. I'm not pitching you on, must have a second career and that type of thing. But for so many feds, it means opportunities for consulting, contract work, private sector employment, small business ownership, teaching. Okay, we have a lot of folks go to faculties. So that additional income can provide flexibility and financial support, also some continuation of purpose. Because one of the things I know, Katelyn knows, and the team here knows, is that a whole lot of feds are mission driven. And then what's the mission after that? But what we're sort of talking about with this is there can be some surprises with that in the form of things like unexpected tax consequences. And how does that come about? Well, number one, notion of income stacking. Well, sounds great, Dan. How do I do that? Well, you're sort of going to do it anyway when you retire. So you'll have the CSRS or FERS pension. If you're FERS, you're 100% going to have Social Security, but you'll also probably be having some planning around taxable TSP withdrawals. Yes, we have Roth TSP. Yes, we've been encouraging people for decades now to take advantage of Roth TSP, but don't forget matching contributions and the automatic 1% still going traditional. So you're still going to have those. And then on top of that, you might have some taxable investments. You might have some part-time or consulting income. And the IRS looks at total income, not each one separate. So even a modest earned income can change the overall tax picture when combined with the other retirement incomes. So the challenge becomes understanding how income from those multiple sources is going to play out. One thing that people get tripped up with regularly is the rules around earnings for claiming Social Security at 62.
Yep. That's a big one.
So many people just lock in on 62 because that's when a FERS supplement goes away. And it's like, oh, don't worry, your FERS supplement goes away, but you can claim Social Security. Never do you see the conversation of should you claim there, because that's technically claiming early, which means there's a permanent reduction. Our buddy Ed Zerndorfer really beats that drum. But there are also earnings limits that go along with claiming it before your full retirement age. So, for example, if you are under that full retirement age for the entire year of 2026, that earnings limit would be $24,480. Well, that seems pretty low, Dan. What happens if I hit that? That means if you go above that, for every $2 you earn, $1 of Social Security income benefit will be deducted from you. Now, there's a formula where it comes back to you once you reach full retirement age, but it's sort of meted out to you over time. So that's not a disaster. It's not permanently lost. And once you reach that full retirement age, then you earn as much as you want. So don't be surprised with that happening. That's the point that we're making. That's why we push all of this content out. So those types of things won't throw you a curve. And especially if you are going out into the consulting world, because in a lot of instances, you could find that you are treated as being self-employed, which means you would have to pay self-employment tax. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is not a tax webinar. Katelyn, maybe that's something you want to throw something into for the future, just kind of talk through that, because it is a little bit of a shock to the system where you've had a very orderly relationship with how taxes are levied and deducted. You've gone along with your career, the taxes come out, you're used to it, you file your taxes. If you overpaid, you get back. If you underpaid, you pay a little bit more. Well, when you move into the self-employment role, you are withholding taxes for yourself as a business and a person. And then you also are paying both sides of Social Security and Medicare. So it can be a little bit of a surprise when you do that. Not a reason to avoid doing something, just a little bit of surprise. Another place where that additional income can impact you has to do with Medicare and tax planning, because more and more people are opting to add Medicare Part B to the mix with their FEHB. Well, if you are above certain income levels, you can end up paying IRMA, income-related monthly adjustment. So again, we're not going to dig into that, but you can run into a situation where you're paying more for your Medicare based on how much was coming in. I tend to be in the Warren Buffett school, who always said, I never got into or out of an investment opportunity based on how I was taxed. I got into or out of it based on if it's something I wanted to do and I felt it would make money. I think if you apply that, you won't be disappointed. The common mistakes that we see, and many times we come in midstream on these things and wish we could have met somebody a year or two earlier. Starting that consulting income, bring it in, don't set aside money for taxes. That's a nasty surprise because if you under remit, you can have some penalties associated with that. Ignoring the possibility that it could affect your Medicare premiums. Starting that job and then deciding to take a huge withdrawal for your TSP to pay off your mortgage. Wham, you could really have some tax surprises there. And one of the big assumptions is assuming that retirement income and earned income might operate differently from a standpoint of the way they are taxed. And possibly one of the biggest ones, waiting until tax filing season before you start reviewing how it's going to look. So this is a situation where forewarned is forearmed. You want to be able to coordinate all of these things and be set up properly so you don't have any costly surprises, pay penalties for under withholding, things like that. But the big thing here, I'm not discouraging anybody from finding fulfilling things to do in retirement. And if those things pay you money, that's not a bad thing. So don't shy away from it, but take the right steps so that you move into it. Thoughtful planning can help post-retirement work complement the overall plan. I'm for it, but please remember, federal service is back-end loaded, and this town does not let its executive talent retire to a hammock. And if you remember those two things, probably won't be surprised. If you want to dig into it more, we are here to help. So, Katelyn, tell us about one of, if not your absolute favorite topics, which is Roth conversion strategy in the new tax era.
Absolutely. So I've been writing about Roth conversions for quite a while now. They're a favorite topic of mine, and I like to keep our, online footprint flush with Roth conversion content because I think this is a really, really, really important topic for you to know about. Now, do I think that everyone listening to this should do a Roth conversion? Absolutely not. Do I think that everyone listening to this should know what a Roth conversion is and evaluate whether it makes sense for them given their own unique financial context? Absolutely. Knowledge is power. And even if it's not something that is going to be viable for you now, it could be something that's viable for you in the future. It could also be viable for somebody that you know or that you love. So with that said, we're sitting in a very interesting place for Roth conversions right now. TCJA, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, created these historically low federal tax brackets that were originally scheduled to expire after 2025. As we all know at this point, in our advantaged perspective here in the future, the OBBBA legislation that was passed in July of 2025 has permanently extended those tax brackets that were currently established under, or that were previously established under TCJA indefinitely, right? Now, when it comes to tax law, and I cannot stress this enough, permanent only means permanent until someone else comes along and changes what the tax brackets are, right? So permanently extended does not mean we will forever and always have these tax brackets that we have right now. In fact, if we look at factors like what our national debt is right now, it is quite likely that we could return to not only pre-TCJA tax brackets, but perhaps tax brackets that are even higher. Do I know that for sure? Absolutely not. Should you make decisions based on a firm, belief that that's what's going to happen? Not necessarily, but I think we should, look at it realistically and think through, do we think that tax rates are going to be higher in the future or lower in the future? And here's the thing that we know for sure is it depends. The one answer in all of financial planning, right? It depends. I think It's quite likely that if you're listening to this podcast and you are in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and if you're listening and you're 90, congrats. Please send us an email. You get a gold star. But my point is that if you are a human being listening to this podcast, you're probably going to experience higher tax bracket times. You're probably going to experience moderate tax bracket times, and you might experience lower tax bracket times, right? I can guarantee that 30 years ago, we probably didn't think that we would have historically low tax brackets in 2017 all the way through, current year 2026, right? So the answer is it depends. right? Tax brackets tend to change. And there's two main things that are kind of impacting the amount of tax that you're paying in retirement. One is what you're spending, and you sort of have some degree of control over that. All right. You can spend less. That's the control that you have. However, you've worked your whole life. You want to have a nice retirement. You want to have a nice quality of life, right? And that's going to require, in some cases, spending money. Depends on what your hobbies are. If your hobbies are gardening and you do it the cheap way, then maybe you're not spending a lot. If your hobbies are golf, you're going to have to pay those fees for the golf course, for your membership, right? And that's not cheap, okay? So you have some degree of control over what you're spending, but here's the stuff that you have to pay for: your mortgage, your utilities, the food that you eat. If you have kids, the kids come with costs all the time, and it doesn't really matter how old they are, right? So when I say that you have some degree over how much you're spending, don't overstate the degree to which you can control that, because while, yes, you can spend less, you may not want to live the life that is necessitated by that budget, right? And if at all possible, the point of financial planning, my whole purpose, is to not have a fixed budget dictating to you what your life can look like in retirement. I want it to be the other way around. And that's the point of doing the planning in advance, okay? The other thing that's going to impact how much you're spending is inflation. And there's not a whole lot of control that you have over that. So be mindful of that. You can buy the same amount of stuff. 20 years later, it's going to cost you more dollars, even if it's not any more stuff, okay?
Sure.
So I said there's two factors. One is how much you spend, okay? The other factor that influences how much tax you're paying is what the tax brackets look like. And over that, my friend, you have likely no direct control, unless you're a member of Congress that's voting on tax legislation and you're listening to this podcast, in which case, reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you about your financial planning. Truly, that's genuine. But most of us who are tuning in, including Dan and I who are hosting the podcast, right? We don't have any direct control over what the tax brackets are going to be, okay? So that's something to be mindful of. There's two components that are determining what you're spending in retirement on taxes. One, you sort of have control over, kind of, to a degree, and the other one you don't really have any direct control over. So how do we plan for uncertain futures? The answer to that question is that we create flexibility. You may not know what's going to happen, and you don't have to know what's going to happen to plan effectively for the future. I am many things, but a fortune teller is not one of them. I can't tell you what the market's going to do. I can't tell you what tax brackets are going to be. I can look at the national deficit, and I can tell you that I don't know that we're going to get away with paying very little tax for a whole lot of time, right? But I can't tell you, genuinely, I can't tell you what tax brackets are going to look like in the future. I can't tell you what the market's going to do. How do we plan? Even though we have uncertain conditions, we create flexibility. And Roth conversions are one way to create that flexibility. Now,
Sure.
The quick and dirty on a Roth conversion, what is it? It's when you pull money out of a pre-tax TSP or pre-tax IRA, and then you convert that money, which is just a fancy way of saying you plop that money over into a Roth TSP or a Roth IRA. Now, if I'm converting from a pre-tax TSP, I've got to go into a Roth TSP. If I'm converting from a pre-tax IRA or a traditional IRA, I've got to go into a Roth IRA, okay? TSP has introduced in-plan conversions. Please, 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 even though you can do an in-plan conversion in the TSP without any advice whatsoever, they will let you do it. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. It's very cool that you can do that. It's cool that that functionality is there. Don't do it without a professional. This is a complex tax strategy, and it is not something that you should be trying on your own. You can mess it up, and it can be very painful if you do. Sometimes you mess it up and you don't know until years down the line. Very expensive to untangle that knot, if it can even be untangled. Okay?
Sure.
So that's what a Roth conversion is. We're pulling money out of pre-tax, we're putting it into Roth. Of course, when we do that, because we're taking it out of a pre-tax bucket, i.e. taxes have not been paid on this money, and putting it into an after-tax bucket, like the Roth, in order to get pre-tax money to after-tax money, what do we have to do? We have to pay the tax. So when we pull it out, if we pull it out into 2026 tax year, we are upfront paying all of the tax due on that amount of the distribution from the pre-tax account that's going into Roth. So even if the money does not come to you, you got to pay the taxes on it. All right. General basics here, things that you want to look at. You want to look at filling out lower tax brackets. Okay. I don't know that you should be converting to Roth in the 37% tax bracket. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. Okay. But if we're in the 12% tax bracket, if we're in the 22% tax bracket, we're in the 24% tax bracket, then it could make sense depending on the rest of your financial context. I'm not here to give specific financial advice, here to give you general education. The benefit to that, right? Katelyn, why would I want to pay tax on a $100,000 Roth conversion in 2026? Because, my beloved feds, in 2036, you may be in your same tax bracket, but instead of being 22% or 24%, that could be 35%, 36%, 40%, right? It could be anything. There's no guarantee that it's going to stay 22 or 24 indefinitely, okay? So the concept with a Roth conversion is I'm doing this because I think taxes are going to be higher at some point in my retirement period than they are right now. And that wording is really important because you'll hear different wording elsewhere. You're not betting that taxes are going to be higher in your retirement period than right now. You're betting that at some point in those 20, 30, 40 plus years, the tax brackets will be higher than they are right now. Is that a pretty decent bet given that we're at historically low tax brackets right now? Probably, right?
Yeah,
Doesn't mean
so.
that a Roth conversion is right for you. You got to consider the context and where you're going to come up with the taxes to pay for that conversion. You can absolutely make an estimated tax payment on Roth conversions. In fact, we typically suggest that people do. It's better to pay the tax when the income is recognized, typically. But if you are interested in some more, if I've piqued your interest maybe, and Roth conversions are not something that you've looked into, I would refer you to my article. The title is Roth Conversion Strategy in the New Tax Era. It will go through what the tax brackets used to be, what they are now, what the 2026 federal tax brackets are, and what the income ranges are. And it will go through the benefits of Roth conversions. And we'll talk about things like tax diversification, having that flexibility in the future to pull from either pre-tax or Roth, depending on what your tax bracket's looking like. I talk about something called the widow tax, a very real thing that is waiting for all of us married folks at some point in the future, okay? The widow tax is a thing, unfortunately, for most people. It's very rare that it doesn't factor into financial planning. Reducing future RMDs and the impact that Roth conversions can have on that. And then lastly, estate planning benefits. If you've got kids, if you've got people you care about that you're leaving your portfolio to, you didn't necessarily have to give birth to them. But if you care about those folks and them getting the most money from you that they can once you are done with it, right? Instead of the government taking a big, huge chunk of that, right, through taxes, check out that article to learn a little bit more about how Roth conversions can help you with estate planning goals as well. But the bottom line really is that, Roth conversions, there's a reason that everybody's talking about them right now. It's because it's a very time-sensitive strategy that makes a lot of sense for a lot of people right now, given where our tax brackets are. But my one big, huge red, underlined, bold takeaway is please talk with a Fed-focused financial advisor and a tax professional before you implement a Roth conversion strategy. It is great. It can be really great, but you can also screw it up. So don't do that. Don't do that. Is that good?
As advertised,
you got it?
Katelyn. Yep. As advertised.
Incredible. All right, everybody. That's all the time that we have for today.
No.
We are going to be back. The Dream Team will be back next week to bring you all the latest updates that you need to make informed decisions about your career and financial well-being as a Fed. I'll shoot straight with you.
Absolutely. And folks, and Katelyn, our analytics show that 78% of the folks who are watching us, a bunch of you are watching us, haven't subscribed. So please subscribe to this podcast on our FedLife YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. And please remember to share it with your friends and colleagues.
Now, if you want more information on the topics that we covered in today's show and so much more, check out our blog at blog.stwserve.com. While you're there, you can subscribe to our newsletter, The Weekly Survey, to get all of the latest news for Feds delivered straight to your inbox every week. Folks, in our busy modern world, there are all kinds of distractions. And what it's about is repetition and getting it in front of your face as much as you can. So I say, listen to the Fed15 podcast. We will be here to bug you every week when you're on your walk, when you're drinking your coffee, when you're on your commute, when you're checking your email. Sign up for the newsletter so that we can pop into your inbox every single Thursday with that information that you need to make those informed decisions. And also set STWServe.com as your homepage for your internet browser. There's 3 ways that you can get those reminders to stay on top of your benefits. I know you're working hard for the benefit of this country. It's my job to make sure that you also pay attention to your own benefits.
Couldn't agree with you more, folks. Fed, you work hard for us, so we're doing our best to work hard for you. And don't forget our live webinars. Every single week, we've got some really good ones coming up. On August 11th, from 11 till 2, we've got our financial planning webinar taught by the inimitable Katelyn Murray. I'll be along as the co-host on that. And then on August 13th, 26, from 1 to 4, we have our incredibly popular tax planning for Feds webinar. Yes, it is not too early. It is not too early to be boning up on what you need to do for the next tax year. Ed Zerndorfer will be teaching that one. Jen Meyer will be the host on it. Remember, there's live Q&A and all of these things. We're probably not going to be able to answer super specific questions, but if you've got some questions about Roth conversions, that's not a bad place to lob some of the general ones. Now, if you prefer one-on-one education, okay, if you do better with a tutor, feel free to reach out to our team directly for a financial planning consultation at meetings@stwserve.com. We will help you any way we can.
All right, folks, that does it for a jam-packed informational episode of the Fed15 podcast. You know that we will be back next week. I have been your host, Katelyn Murray.
And I'm Dan Sipe.
And we will see you next week.
Absolutely.